Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. Still doing this show, even though the first couple of days I did it, I thought I was only going to last a week or two. It's a good thing Arturo talked me into it. David Subith contacted me and asked if I would do a show on the Orangpendek. So here it is. In Indonesian folklore, the Orangpendek, which some sites say means short person, is the most common name given to a creature said to inhabit remote mountainous forests on the island of Sumatra. I have listeners in Sumatra, so if I accidentally mispronounce the names or if I give out some facts that y'all don't believe are true, contact me, let me know the mistakes. I actually do listen to my listeners most of the time. The Orangpendek stands about 30 to 60 inches tall. It's been seen for hundreds of years by the people living in the forests in and around Sumatra, Indonesia, different parts of that part of the world. I've seen and read the name as being one word or two. I'll let you decide how to write it. I've also seen folks refer to the Orangpendek as being an animal, while those who have lived around it say they are closer to human than animal. Similar animals have historically been said to dwell in Sumatra, Indonesia, and Southeast Asia. Sightings have occurred largely within the Karahanisi Regency of Central Asia, and sightings have occurred in Sumatra and the national park there. The Suku Anak Dalam, children of the inner forest, also known as Orang Kubu, Orang Batin Simbilan, or Orang Rimba, are groups of nomadic people who have traditionally lived throughout the lowland forests of Jambi and South Sumatra. According to their legends, Orangpendek has been a part of their world and a co-inhabitant of the forest for centuries. In Bukit Dubalenas, the Orang Rimba speak of a creature known as Hantu Pendek, whose description closely matches that of the Orangpendek. Hantu Pendek is said to be more as a supernatural entity or a demon rather than an animal. Hantu Pendek translates as short ghost. According to the Orang Rimba, the Hantu Pendek travel in groups of 5 or 6, subsisting on wild plants, hunting animals with small axes. Some say these creatures will ambush unfortunate Orang Rimba hunters traveling alone in the forest. Those unfortunate enough to have an encounter are never seen again. Along the Makakal River on the western edge of Bukit Tubalis, people recount a legend of how their ancestors outsmarted these cunning yet dim-witted creatures during a hunting trip, and the story is often used to boast of their intellect and reason. Witnesses and legends describe Orangpendek as being either an ape, about 3 feet tall, with a very strong chest and arms, short hair covering its body. It walks upright on 2 legs. It's either a short person or an animal, depending on who you ask, and it lives in the forest. The name Orangpendek means short person, but many still say it's just an ape that walks like a man. When most apes walk on their back feet, they sway from side to side to maintain their balance. Sometimes they'll hold their arms up in the air and move them back and forth as well. If they don't walk this manner, then they'll walk on their hind legs, but they do have to use their knuckles in order to stay upright. Apes and monkeys have ascribed human-like qualities throughout history in this region of the world. People traveling through the forest have come across footprints that are not human-looking, yet there are no signs of the creature using its hands to support itself. Having worked sign cutting in the past, you can tell a lot about a person making the tracks you're following. If you've been on the sign for some time, you'll notice the footprints begin to show signs of wandering across the trail, just a bit. The prints will have drag marks as the person is no longer lifting their feet like they had been. Local hunters rely on their tracking ability to put food on the table. You could say their life depends on their tracking skills. They know what lives around them in the forest, and they know what all the creatures' footprints look like. Had this just been someone's imagination, there wouldn't be any tracks. Had this been an ape, there would have been hand or knuckle prints every so often as the creature moved down the trail. The Suku-Anik Dalam are a group of primitive people who have lived in the area's forests for generations, spanning back hundreds or more years. They live in small groups, and they never set foot in towns and cities. They have had encounters with short, hair-covered beings that live in the same area as them, but choose to stay away from the hairless creatures. Orangpendek has been part of the Suku-Anik Dalam's world for centuries. Outsiders have been documenting the culture of this forest-dwelling tribe for decades. They describe the hairy creature as a co-inhabitant of the forest. They know when they are entering and leaving Orangpendek territory, and they will often leave gifts of tobacco in order to keep the creatures happy. The local villagers venture into the jungle to either hunt, look for food, or pass through on their way to the villages or towns. They also report seeing 3 to 5 foot tall creatures covered in light brown or reddish hair. The hairy creatures would disappear into the thick jungle instead of coming forward to interact with these villagers. All of these villagers have either seen an Orangpendek or they know somebody that has seen one. The stories of these hairy diminutive folks was a common subject around the villages. There were some tales that just kind of went too far. One being told was that the Orangpendek had its feet facing the wrong direction. The toes were pointed backwards. This backwards-facing feet made tracking the creature impossible. Well, once again, back to my own experience. Any time we came across footprints going the wrong direction, especially out on a ranch in the middle of nowhere, we could quickly figure out that the folks were walking backwards by simply... I'm not going to go into that. You never know who might be listening, and I don't want to make it any easier for the bad folks or harder for the good folks to do their jobs. If the person tracking the Orangpendek really wanted to find one, all he had to do was backtrack it. follow the tracks back the way it looked like they had come. I would guess the folks saying they couldn't track the forest people probably didn't want to find them. Remember that story about being ambushed and killed? You're telling others about finding weird footprints in the forest, and somebody says, "Why didn't you follow them?" Well, I did, but their feet are on backwards, so I couldn't find the person making these tracks. The whole reason for our foot being put on the way it is makes it possible for us to walk. The heel absorbs the impact as we put weight on our foot. The arch works like a suspension bridge, distributing our weight across the entire foot. The ball allows our foot to flex, and the toes work to keep us balanced. If our feet were put on backwards, we'd find it difficult to walk. Like I said, I think this was just a story to excuse the teller for not following the footprints. Some of the locals consider the Orangpendek to be a spirit or a ghost. Some were afraid of walking in the jungle at night, saying the Orangpendek might attack them. Others said it wasn't the Orangpendek they were afraid of, but some other unknown being that lurked in the darkness. Something they couldn't put a name to, so they simply blamed it on the one that they could. Dutch settlers who arrived in the early 20th century, intending on farming the land or taking any mineral or natural resources, they were going to use the locals to do all the work. On occasion, they would encounter the Orangpendek. One account in particular is widely reported. Mr. Van Herwarden told of his encounter while surveying land in 1923. He said, "I discovered a dark and hairy creature on a branch. The Sidapa, another name for the Orangpendek, was also hairy on the front of its body. The color there was light brown. It was also lighter than on its back. The very dark hair on its head fell to just below the shoulder blades, or even almost to the waist. It was fairly thick and very shaggy. The lower part of its face seemed to end in more of a point than a man's. This brown face was almost hairless, whilst its forehead seemed to be higher than low. Its eyebrows were frankly moving. They were the darkest color, very likely and like human eyes. The nose was broad, with fairly large nostrils, but in no way clumsy. The lips were quite ordinary, but the width of its mouth was strikingly wide when open. Its canines showed clearly from time to time as its mouth twitched nervously. They seemed fairly large to me. In all events, they were more developed than a man's. The incisors were regular. The color of the teeth was yellowish white. Its chin was somewhat receding. For a moment during a quick movement, I was able to see its right ear, which was exactly like a little human ear. Its hands were slightly hairy on the back. Had it been standing, its arms would have reached a little above its knees. They were therefore long, but its legs seemed to me rather short. I did not see its feet, but I did see some toes which were shaped a very normal manner. The specimen was of a female sex and about 5 feet tall. There was nothing repulsive or ugly about its face, nor was it at all ape-like. There was nothing repulsive or ugly about the creature whatsoever. Van Herwarden put his gun down and he clomb the tree. This caused the Orangpendek to run out on a branch which drooped down about 9 feet to the ground. Van Herwarden dashed back down to the ground, but as he raised his gun to shoot the creature, he found himself unable to fire. Watching the flowing hair from the fleeing Orangpendek, he realized he would feel like a murderer if he were to kill so human-like a creature. Like so many men before him, he returned to Europe with a good sighting, but no proof. One museum curator even rejected Van Herwarden's account on the grounds that it was too exact. Too exact? Like the witness had paid too much attention to what he was looking at. Westerners have also reported catching fleeting sights of a hairy human-like creature in the trees. I wonder, do these primitive folk looking at us, so-called civilized people, and say, those poor people, they think they know how the world works? Are our stories of flying in airplanes considered to be just us all being delusional? Those folks think they walked on the moon. Another witness, Mr. Ushting, described another first-hand encounter with a strange animal. While walking through the forest, he saw what looked like a man. He said, "I saw that he had short hair. Cut short, I thought, and I suddenly realized that his neck was oddly leathery and extremely filthy. That chap's got a very dirty and wrinkled neck," I said to myself. His body was as large as a medium-sized native, and he had thick, square shoulders, and not sloping at all. He seemed to be quite as tall as I. Then I saw that it was not a man. It was not an orangutan. I had seen one of those large apes a short time before. It was more like a monstrously large siamang. But a siamang has long hair, and there was no doubt that this had short hair. A siamang is a tree-dwelling, black-furred gibbon, a native to the forests of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. The largest of the gibbons, the siamang can be twice the size of others, reaching 3 feet in height and weighing up to 30 pounds. These witness accounts were written down and passed on to us only to be questioned and denied by the boys in the white lab coats. Their reasoning goes, "I don't believe it, so therefore it's not true." There are some scientists out there looking instead of naysaying. 2 British researchers, Debbie Martyr and Jeremy Holden, both have been working more or less continuously in order to photograph an Orangpendek since 1990. Both say they have seen an Orangpendek personally on several occasions. Their Project Orangpendek was funded by the Fauna and Flora International. The pair are going about their search kind of the same way as many Bigfoot researchers try to find Sasquatch. Camera traps and trail cams. I have a problem with using trail cams to capture evidence of certain creatures. The trigger device is an ultraviolet beam that must be broken to cause an image to be created. If the creature can see the beam, it might avoid it. Reindeer spend most of their time in heavy snow or flying from roof to roof. If you don't believe in Santa Claus, I have some photos to show you. Snow is very reflective and will reflect a large amount of light into the eyes of any animal that is around it. Because of this, reindeer have developed a sense for ultraviolet radiation. Birds can also see UV light. They use this ability to find their way back to their nests. They might just use it for other reasons, but so far scientists have only found the one use. Bats can see UV light, and this allows them to hunt at night. They also use UV to communicate with each other. Bees are almost dependent solely on UV light to find the plants that they're going to pollinate and collect pollen from to feed their young and create honey. Rats have a visible spectrum that allows them to see wavelengths of ultraviolet light. Some fish and butterflies can also see UV light. They use these abilities to their full advantage. The dragonfish that lives miles below the surface uses UV light to hunt. With the massive use of cameras and video equipment, just about everybody is relying on UV light to focus and to trigger automatic shutters. I talked to several Bigfoot researchers about the possibility of Bigfoot seeing the camera traps. They all gave me that somebody's crazy look. They just keep doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a photograph of Bigfoot, and they wonder why they never get one. Okay, who's the crazy ones now? Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were using a wind-up camera with manual focus. Nothing electronic and nothing giving off UV or IR light. The Memorial Day video was caught using a digital camera, but the creature was spotted before the camera was turned on. What folks should try is coming up with some other kind of a trigger device, maybe seismic or a pressure pad. How do we know the Orangpendek can't see the camera trap and simply avoid them? Some cameras give off a very slight sound as they are working. Now, humans might not hear it, but maybe the Orangpendek and Bigfoot have been hearing these cameras, and that's why they avoid them. Way back, when I had an actual honest-to-God camera, it was a Sony with night vision. Cool. Just what you need for ghost hunts. Any time I would turn it on and aim it at a dog, my dog would shy away from it. If I turned the camera off and then aimed it at her, she would come over and try to lick the lens. As soon as I pushed the power button, she would sneak away. So there had to have been something coming off that camera that my dog was aware of. So why can't other creatures have this same sense? Some suggest the Orangpendek could be a missing link, a distant relative of ours representing an intermediate stage between us humans and ancient ape-like primates from which we are supposed to have descended. I do know some folks who probably are descendants of monkeys. They act the part. The theory of evolution is just a theory. I looked up the word theory and I found all kinds of definitions that say a theory was a means of connecting scientific facts. So I looked it up in an old-fashioned book. The dictionary said a theory was an unproved assumption. Our language is being changed so those who think they're in charge can control how we think. The Nazis were National Socialists. Socialists are left-wing radicals. Today, if you look up the word, it says they were right-wing radicals. What changed? Well, the people in charge. I'm getting off the subject again. When Charles Darwin came up with his theory, he didn't have any proof, just his assumptions. You know what happens when you assume. Scientists set out to prove him right because they wanted to attach themselves to the notoriety Darwin was receiving. In 1912, some folks came running in from the wilderness shouting they had found proof of the theory of evolution. They had found the Piltdown Man, a 500,000-year-old ancestor of ours that looked like an ape man. The scientific community gathered around, patting these folks on the back for their work in furthering the theory. They could now prove that man had descended from apes. Finally, in 1949, a researcher took a closer look and he said the remains were more like 50,000 years old and they were a compilation of two different creatures, an ape and a man. This was no simple mistake. The bones had been filed down so they would fit together. The teeth of the ape had been made to look human. Everything had been stained so that it would look far older than it actually was. Their missing link had gone missing once more. The discovery of this giant lie didn't receive nearly as much press as the lie had back in 1919. The scientists wanted it to be true. It's funny how scientists are found to be lying to us on numerous occasions, yet when somebody pops up with some bizarre statement, people clamor to declare, this time they got it right. I don't want to get into how many times the scientific community has completely screwed up, and yet people are still patting them on the back saying, good job. Too many people have brought into the theory of evolution. To an extent, they are actively looking for proof and ignoring any evidence to the contrary. Some scientists say the Orangpendek may be a survivor of some long-lost creature from the past. When bones were found in a cave on the island of Flores in Indonesia, they named this new discovery Homo florensis. A lot of folks began calling this being the hobbit, a lot easier to pronounce. The woman stands just over 3 feet tall. At first, they thought this was just an anomaly until they found several other skeletons that ran about the same height. The dates given are all over the place, ranging from 50,000 years to 100,000 years ago. Local legends from around the island of Flores, passed on from generation to generation by the Ubu Gogo tribe, tell of small, hairy cave dwellers similar in size to the Homo florensis. This has led to some researchers to believe maybe the hobbits managed to live hidden away on the island up until recent times. The hobbits used fire and they made tools. They hunted and they lived in family units. No evidence of any kind of a hut or tents was found, leading the scientists to believe that the hobbits lived in caves. Actual, honest-to-God cavemen. There are more theories about these diminutive folks than there is evidence of their existence. One group of whitecoats believed the hobbits started out as normal-sized Homo erectus, or Australopithecans, that migrated to the island and lost contact with all of her species of ancient humans. Having a limited food source, the people slowly began to shrink. After thousands of years, they came to about 3 feet tall, and they stayed there from there. That was too redundant. They stayed that size from there. Other researchers say the hobbits were a distinct group who started out thousands of years ago as short people, and they never got any bigger. A few folks, I forgot to unplug something, didn't I? Somebody calling wanting me to buy they want to sell me some warranty for my vehicle. I absolutely hate that thing. I should have unplugged it, but I forgot. Oh well. Getting back to wherever it was I was. Okay, that was redundant too. A few folks have suggested the Orangpendek is either one of the hobbits who lived in the island jungles of Indonesia or is a descendant of them. If this were the case, then the Orangpendek would be more human than ape. Nick Redfern had this to say about the Orangpendek. If you're familiar with Nick's voice from watching Ancient Aliens and just about every other show on TV that has to do with paranormal, you can put in the British accent for yourself. I am not going to try. Anytime I read anything by Nick, I can hear his voice saying what I'm reading. Next to Bigfoot and the abdominal snowman, probably the most talked about cryptid ape is the Orangpendek, a small bipedal creature that dwells in the thick forests of Sumatra. Although expeditions to find the creature have certainly come to the fore in the last couple of decades, the people of Sumatra have a history and a lore of the animal that dates back to the beginning of recorded time on the island. Given that the Orangpendek walks upright, just as we do, and stands at a height of 4 to 4.5 feet in height, its name is highly appropriate. In English, it translates to short man. Most witnesses to the creature describe it as having black or brownish hair. However, a somewhat reddish-colored hair has also been reported in a minority of cases. Also echoing the idea of Orangpendek having somewhat human qualities, it is sometimes said to have a head of long, flowing hair that extends to the shoulders, but which may actually be something more like the mane of a lion. And not only do the Orangpendek do an excellent job of avoiding people while living, hunting, and feeding in the thick, mysterious forests, by all accounts, they do a good job of avoiding each other, too. Indeed, most of the reports describing a creature that seems to be overwhelmingly solitary, aside, of course, from when it is mating. This is at variance with the actions of many apes, which are highly social animals, living in groups. Interestingly, however, the image of the Orangpendek being a definitive loner very closely mirrors the life of Bigfoot, another anomalous ape seen more often than not on its own. Although the creature is reputedly immensely strong and possesses large muscular arms, it is not considered to be dangerous to people. Certainly, most witnesses that have encountered the beast at close quarters have said that when seen, it generally makes good its escape, rather than acting in an aggressive fashion. That said, there are a few reports of Orangpendek hurling stones and rocks at people, but such reports are definitely in the minority. As for Orangpendek's diet, vegetable and fruit are said to be the top of the list, followed by tubers and fish. A study of the history of the people of Sumatra demonstrates that the existence of small, hairy, human-like animals on the island has been accepted for centuries. That different regions have different names for the creature has led to an interesting concept, that there might be more than one kind of cryptid ape on Sumatra. Of course, the likelihood is that despite the difference in names, the animals are one and the same, although admittedly that is far from certain, chiefly because some of the reports coming out of Sumatra describe animals clearly ape-like, whereas others seem almost eerily close to us, both physically and in terms of their actions. The list of witnesses to the Orangpendek is long and impressive. It's a list filled with highly credible individuals. In the summer of 1927, just such a creature was encountered by A.H.W. Kramer, who was employed by a plantation company and who got within 30 feet of an Orangpendek near Carinthia. The animal was short and was noted for its long hair and its eerily human-like footprints. Not long afterwards, Sergeant Major Van Eysch of the Topographical Service had his very own sighting near a large jungle-surrounded cliff in Surlagoon. As the creature, seemingly oblivious to the presence of Van Eysch, for a while at least, sauntered along, the sergeant major could see its huge muscular chest, wide head, a dark skin, and large fangs. A respected explorer named Benedict Allen heard numerous stories of sightings of the Orangpendek during the Second World War. One of them concerned the rare sighting of an entire group of Orangpendek violently hurling sticks at workmen on the Trans-Sumatran Highway. There's no doubt, however, that the most important figure in the controversial saga of Orangpendek is Debbie Martyr. Her quest to uncover the truth of the Orangpendek began in the late part of the 1980s. It was in July 1989 that Martyr visited Sumatra as a travel writer. It was while Martyr was camped on the slopes of Mount Carinthia that her guide told her of the Orangpendek and that he had even seen the creature on a couple of occasions. It was for Martyr the beginning of an extensive study for the truth of the Orangpendek, a study that has resulted in a collection of notable evidence and even first-hand encounter. Among the evidence was the cast of what was believed to be the print of an Orangpendek. It was shared with Dr. David Chivers of the University of Cambridge in England, who commented that the cast of the footprint taken was definitely an ape, with a unique blend of features from gibbon, orangutan, a chimpanzee, and human. From further examination, the print did not match any known primate species, and I can conclude that this points towards there being a large, unknown primate in the forests of Sumatra. Most significantly of all was Martyr's very own sighting of just such an animal, which she described as follows. I saw it in the middle of September. I had been out here on Sumatra for 4 months. When I saw it, I saw an animal that didn't look like anything in any of the books I had read, films I had seen, or the zoos that I have been to. It did indeed walk rather like a person, and that was a shock. She added that in terms of appearance, the Orangpendek was a relatively small, immensely strong, non-human primate. It was built like a boxer, with immense upper body strength. It was a gorgeous color, moving bipedally and trying to avoid being seen. Richard Freeman, a zoological director of the Center for Fortean Zoology, believes that it is only a matter of time before the existence of Orangpendek is proven, once and for all and conclusively. Nick Redfern works full-time as a writer, lecturer, and journalist. He writes about a wide range of unsolved mysteries, including Bigfoot, UFOs, the Loch Ness Monster, alien encounters, and government conspiracies. Nick has written 41 books from Mysterious Universe and appeared on numerous television shows on the History Channel, the National Geographic Channel, and the Sci-Fi Channel. He was on the show June 11th, 2016. I'd love to get him on again, but Nick is a busy man. He writes books and appears at conferences and on TV all the time. I don't think the man ever sleeps. It's a joke amongst most of the community that Nick will write a new book while he's waiting to talk about the old book that he just wrote. Early in October 1997, newspapers from London to Melbourne related the following story about the Orangpendek. The creature stumbled across the wire, triggering the camera shutter, capturing its image on film. This was a picture of an ape walking almost erect, a creature with long red mane that could be man's nearest cousin, a new species of primate that could rewrite the books on evolutionary theory. As the pictures filtered out of the world of zoologists and anthropologists, the debate began. Well, the official story is the newspapers got the story wrong. Expedition members told Loren Coleman that they had seen and cast footprints, but they had no clear photograph. The two earlier fuzzy pictures referred to in other press reports were suspect from the beginning, though expedition members had to investigate for months to confirm they were probably fakes. An Orangpendek had not walked through a camera trap. On Sumatra, Claude Petit, professor and biologist, has been looking into the reports of the Orangpendek since 1980. As the personal friend of Kerinci National Park Director Cornelia Roff, Petit was able to examine the plaster casts that were held by the National Park Office before it was burned. The fire was the result of arson. The status of the Orangpendek casts collection is now uncertain. I wonder who set the place on fire and why. To me, it sounds like someone, maybe a group, wanted to destroy the casts for some reason, probably to eliminate evidence of the Orangpendek. Who would do such a thing? Just use your imagination. Petit said this cast was about a foot long, 2.5 inches wide. The toes were not noticeable, and there was no arch of the foot. If you follow Bigfoot stories, you'll know the creature doesn't have an arch. Instead, there is a mid-dorsal break where their foot bends differently from ours. Perhaps the Orangpendek is closer to Bigfoot in its physiology. Petit was skeptical of the cast's authenticity, suspecting that it was something concocted for the tourists. He collected a fair amount of compelling and consistent testimony from witnesses who agreed that the creature of the forests east of Lake Kerinci is 4 feet tall and bipedal. South of Lampong, in the area of Liwa, a huge earthquake in 1995 caused some disruption in the wildlife population. According to Petit, the local people reported that animals looking like Orangpendek came out of the forest briefly frightened by the seismic activity. In October 1997, Martyr said she found footprints she considered valid, apparently made by some individual Orangpendek. 1998, in the same area, she and one of her expedition members saw a large primate in a tree. Another researcher, French botanist Yves Lamonnière, has also collected convincing reports from the area during the 1990s. He said, sightings of the tiny ape-like called Orangpendek on the island of Sumatra have caught the attention of cryptozoologists and anthropologists alike. Like a miniature Bigfoot, this humanoid creature is bipedal, ape-like, and covered with thick fur. Though it stands only about a meter tall, it is incredibly powerful and said to have the strength to tear small trees straight out of the ground. Even though Orangpendek is most often described as a vegetarian, locals are wary not to get on the wrong side of the creature, and they give it a wide berth. It isn't normally dangerous, but with its incredible power and ferocity, it would make a quick work out of a human. This doesn't stop curious from seeking the beast, and the cryptozoologists are taking an increased interest. Large terrestrial animals, such as the great panda, the mountain gorilla, were thought to exist only in legend until researchers documented them in the not-so-distant past. Given the density of the Sumatran forest, could Orangpendek be a similar lost species? The gibbon and the orangutan are two such creatures. Gibbons can walk on two legs for short periods of time. Orangutans can look remarkably human-like and are tremendously strong. Though they spend much of their time up in trees, they may plod along the ground on 2 feet from time to time. In 2007, researchers discovered a previously unknown population of more than 100,000 western lowland gorillas in the Republic of the Congo. This is interesting considering that prior to this discovery, scientists believed there were less than 100,000 of these animals existing in the entire world. We didn't know half of the western lowland gorilla existed until 2007. Some think the Orangpendek may be an unknown species of primate, as yet to be classified by science. Considering its size, roughly around that of a chimpanzee, the creature could go undetected in dense jungle like those in Sumatra for a very long time. The people who make their homes in the area where the Orangpendek live have been seeing it and hearing tales about it their entire lives. Western scientists consider it undiscovered. The people of Sumatra know it exists and consider it just another creature of the forest. Why is it some guy in a lab has the authority to declare what is and what isn't? Who gave him that much power? Experts will tell you no mountain lions live east of I-35. That mountain lion I saw on the Killam Ranch must not have known he didn't exist. Everybody knows there are mountain lions out there. They know they exist. A lot of people have had very tragic encounters with them. When's the last time you saw a mountain lion? My entire career working in the brush, I have only seen 4. And 2 of those were at the same time, and I was hanging out the door of a helicopter. A lot of folks out there think the entire world has been mapped and examined by either satellite or drone. 100,000 gorillas went unseen and unknown until 2007. How hard would it be for, say, a dozen Orangpendek to live in the jungle and never be seen by the white lab coats? In the Bigfoot community, I am considered to be a woo or a woo-woo. I am willing to consider Bigfoot to be something other than an animal. Too many researchers have banged the gavel declaring Bigfoot is nothing other than a great big ape. They don't have a body to study. They don't have a Bigfoot to talk to. They have some blurry photographs and some footprint casts. Yet, they know what Bigfoot is and isn't. I don't care if they think I'm off a few degrees. It would be nice for them to keep an open mind just in case someday a flying saucer does land on the White House lawn and Bigfoot gets out of it. One reason so many researchers are unwilling to consider Bigfoot and the Orangpendek as being anything other than an animal is money. Researchers need funding to do their work. The cash comes from grants that almost all come from universities, museums, or the government. This is the same reason so many climatologists have the banner of climate crisis. The money comes from folks with an agenda, seeing as so many super rich folks have tons of money invested in green energy solutions. If you say anything that might interfere with their investments, you'll find yourself without a sugar daddy to pay for your research. Science by decree. Some researchers are expected to prove a preconceived thought process as opposed to actually going out and finding out what's going on. Finding some unknown species of ape would be a leg up for the researchers and the folks funding them. It would elevate them in the world, which would mean more money coming in. On the other hand, finding a new species of human might lead to all kinds of trouble. Does this give them voting rights? Who will get to decide what is best for a tribe of people with no idea about the rest of the world? There would be many people out there, the extreme religious folks, who might just object to any form of different human. I've talked to some people who throw down the old religious card at the drop of a hat. They don't believe in UFOs, ghosts, or Bigfoot because they're not mentioned in the Bible. And never mind about Genesis 25:25. Now the first to come forth, red, all over, like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. And there's Genesis 27:11. Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, Behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Just how hairy was this guy? In order to trick his dad, Jacob covered his hands and his neck with goat skin. Now, goats are very hairy animals. This makes me think that Esau was kind of hairy like a Bigfoot. You can find UFOs and ghosts in the Bible as long as you have an open mind. It shouldn't be too open in case your brain falls out, but open enough to let ideas in. The mind is like a parachute. Works best when it's open. There are some folks in high positions of power who refuse to consider any other form of human can exist. These are the folks who consider doing anything to keep their tiny vision of the world intact. I am not a proponent of the theory of evolution. I don't consider the Big Bang to be an answer to anything other than firing the main gun on a tank. Darwin was drinking too much as far as I'm concerned. This doesn't mean I don't think way back there were different kinds of creatures that were similar to humans. There could have been something closer to an ape man than us. They must have had some purpose, and once it was done, they died off. Or they might have slipped into the forests and caves and continue living, staying away from us, seeing as we tend to kill off each other and anything around us on a regular basis. If something kind of human, but not completely human, were to be found, you know there would be somebody wanting to hunt one down and kill it so they could have a trophy in their collection. Those guys on killing Bigfoot are a good or a bad example of what some people will do in the name of science. They say they want to kill one to protect the rest. Wonder what the rest would think about that if they were to learn that one of their relatives, a cousin, a brother, a sister, is shot by these folks, now they would probably be upset. The folks living in Indonesia also have the legend of the Ibu Gogo. Now, this creature stood about 4 feet tall, was covered in fur or hair, and it walked on 2 legs. The legend says the people encountering the Ibu Gogo considered them to be more of a pest than another form of human. The creatures might have been scavengers, or maybe they snuck into the camp on occasion and took what they needed, stealing the villagers' food or clothing. Now, people looking into these legends have come to the conclusion this thing might have been an Orangpendek from long ago. Once in a while I was doing the research, I would come across the name like the Ibu Gogo. In one story, they were referred to as a tribe living in the jungle, and then in another article, they were a creature living in the jungle. Not knowing which one is correct, I simply gave you both. Orangpendek is another Sumatran jungle dweller known to the local people that is not considered to be an ape, but a small version of humans. The Orangpendek is known to sneak into village at night and steal anything that was there. They carry spears, hunt animals, and have been known to attack villagers from time to time. Another researcher working in the jungles of Sumatra is Richard Freeman. He has been exploring areas like western Sumatra for years, photographing species that have never been documented before. According to Freeman, he's taken photographs of 60 never-before-seen species, making the chance that an unknown species of primate exists there relatively high. In 2011, the largest expedition to hunt for Orangpendek consisted of a bunch of well-known cryptozoologists, researchers, and naturalists. Adam Davies, who I've met and talked to but never got around to inviting him on the show, was the expedition leader. A whole bunch of folks were involved, like Dave Archer, Andrew Sanderson, Dr. Chris Clark, Elisa Malum, on and on. Like I said, it was the largest expedition in the area. They broke into 2 teams and they explored areas where reports of Orangpendek had been coming in from. They did all the usual, like setting up trail cameras and looking for tracks. It was the rainy season, and they almost got washed away during the night. They were visited by some tigers who strolled through their camp at night looking for an easy meal. The problem with large expeditions is they have a lot of people who will need a lot of food and water, and they create a lot of human waste. Let's face it, when nature calls, you've got to go. Moving a large contingent of explorers also creates a lot of noise. No matter how careful you are, sound carries. The expedition spent 7 days and nights in the jungle, but only had a few photographs of birds and some animals. The few tracks they found were all ruled out as being something known. They are planning to try again in the near future. There are several videos on YouTube that are supposed to be Orangpendek sightings. One is a bunch of guys on dirt bikes zipping along a dirt trail when a short man carrying a spear darts out from the trees and runs in front of the riders. The man running looks to be naked. He could be covered in short hair. It's hard to tell from the video because the person filming was using a GoPro mounted on his helmet, and the runner is fast. If this was an Orangpendek, carrying a spear would rule out this being just some animal or ape. Some other Orangpendek videos are so blurry the thing being filmed could be anything from an orangutan to a child. Or it could be an Orangpendek. As I was researching this show, there were dozens of websites and groups, all with Orangpendek somewhere in their title. After checking out just about all of them, I noticed a few things. One was they all had pretty much the same information. Some were the same word for word. I also noticed nobody wanted to talk about maybe the creature being from some other dimension. Seeing as science pretty much accepts there being more than one dimension, the possibility of something getting from one to another should at least be considered. For unknown reasons, something steps through from here to there, or from there to here. It's seen, and then it steps back across, leaving behind a few footprints and some confused witnesses. I've heard too many stories from people who have seen a Bigfoot, or they've followed the tracks across a trail or through the woods, only to find the tracks simply vanish. There aren't a whole lot of ways to explain this other than the creature stepped through a portal into another dimension. At least that's the way I see it. Other people, well, they come up with their pet theories as to what happened. Maybe the Bigfoot sprouted wings and flew away. For some unknown reason, like I said, something steps from there to here, and it's seen, and then it's gone. There's also the possibility of time slips. Lionel Fanthorpe has said that time might not be linear, but all rolled up like a ball. Where two lines cross or run alongside each other, people get a glimpse into the other time. Like those Roman soldiers seen in York or wherever it was that one of my listeners got a little mad at me because I put them down in the wrong location. Naturally, it was on YouTube. If anybody is going to complain about the show, it's going to be on YouTube. I've talked to other podcasters, and they all agree. You never get comments like that on your regular page. It's always on YouTube. I wonder why. If two timelines running parallel, and hundreds of thousands of years ago, a small, hairy humanoid was in an area and seen by someone recently, this could be a form of a time slip. As long as we don't know what people are seeing, how can we say what it isn't? Just because most of the folks seeing the Orangpendek are the folks living in the jungle, doesn't make their sightings less valid. I saw a report one time where a bunch of college folks judged the intelligence of cities based on the number of PhDs living there. Do you know what every PhD knows? Where the library is. Most do their research sitting at a desk reading what other folks have written. Laredo was number 3 in having the lowest intelligence. Well, there's not a lot of PhDs living here. Another study simply went by how many folks had degrees. I've known some real stupid people with all kinds of letters behind their names. I've met some college graduates who couldn't fix a flat tire. And that might not sound dumb until they're stuck on the side of the road with a flat. I would love to venture into the jungles of Sumatra looking for the Orangpendek. Right now, my bank account says I'm not going. Just as soon as I become independently wealthy, I'll head on over and see what I can find. If enough listeners go to TeePublic and buy some Strange Things merchandise, or they go to Amazon and buy some of my books, I just might have the cash to do some more field research. If you have something you'd like to hear about on the show, send me a line at strangethings@arkanasa.com, and I'll try to make it happy. Happen. I'm getting to the end of the show, and my mouth is about worn out. I've used all my words for the day. If you have a story you'd like to share in my next book, send it to me. I'll write it up and make it pretty, easy to read. Then I will send you back the draft so you can say, yes, that's what I said, or wait a minute, you need to change something. I don't always make a really good first draft. I remember one case I had a witness to a paranormal event, and it took about 8 tries to get their sighting written out the way they wanted it. Yeah, sometimes it's a lot of work. Other times they say that's exactly what happened. So, if you've got a good story, something you heard from your grandfather or your grandmother, your dad or your next door neighbor, send it to me. I'll type it up and I'll send it back. You can approve it. And if it's what you like to read, it'll go in my next book. Tell your neighbors, tell your friends what they've been missing. Tell them to listen up. I can use the audience. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.